every week. We're going to take a look back this week at our perspective of the Monday Night Wars. I would hardly say that each of us, Casey, was integral to the Monday Night Wars, but we were there on opposite sides of the war, so we could give our perspective of what we saw, what we learned, what we heard, and what we know.
Oh, of course. We both have, you had a bigger role than I did, but I was there and I seen and heard pretty much everything that happened in WCW.
I had a small role at that point, but I do remember seeing some things that were troubling to me as a young broadcaster in the company that were affecting what I thought would be our future. All right, so let's get started. Everybody is joining live all across different social media platforms. And of course, if you miss any portion of it, it'll always be available for you to download, to talk about, and to share. Like, subscribe, and share on YouTube. We're going to keep this podcast to about 30 minutes, and we're going to try that every week. And we want you to share this with 3 friends. So tell everybody you know about it. All right. So back in 1996, as we take a look at what things were transpiring in the battle between WCW and then WWF. It was not a new fight, but the fight had changed with the addition of Monday Nitro and the signing of Lex Luger, and WCW making moves on former stars. Obviously, it all began with Hogan when he jumped ship, when he left, and of course, things were beginning to change in the wrestling industry. But in the summer of 1996, it was the Summer Olympics that had a huge role in what transpired, at least logistically, for WCW. Because you see, the 96 Olympics were in Atlanta, and WCW and their offices in Atlanta, they decided to move their operation down to Florida, where they were taping, mass taping at MGM Studios, and that was where they were going to be headquartered for the entire month that the Olympics were there. So that's the reason why Hogan's Bash at the Beach, Bash at the Beach happened in Florida, and why, Casey, you were there for so many things that happened, because they were taping not just the syndicated programs, but they were also doing Nitro as well.
Oh, they were doing Monday Night Nitro outside of MGM. They built a makeshift studio right outside with palm trees around it, and it was a sight to see. The couple thousand people, but TV, you could make a couple. With a good producer, TV, you can make a couple thousand people look like 10,000, 20,000 people. Trust me, they're doing that on TV right now a lot.
There were a lot of, and there were things that were really working in WCW's favor, such as the weather. Now, it was still hot, but it was not, typical nighttime thunderstorms in Central Florida that would always seem to crop up all summer long. It was like WCW had the weather gods on their side.
It seems like everything was going in the way for WCW. Eventually, they found their footing, and that's the big 83 weeks when the ratings were going back and forth, and then WCW they went ahead and took 83 weeks. They were winning in the ratings. When you look at this perspective,
hey Casey, I figured it out. Oh yeah, there we are. Thank you. I was having a little audio issue, folks.
Well, see, everything here on the In-Ring Wrestling Podcast is raw. There's nothing. There's no edits. We're just straight up. What you see is what you got. So
we would edit, but we're not smart enough to do that. Anyway,
well, we haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, once we learn this stuff, it's dangerous.
What I was saying is WCW went ahead for 83 weeks in the ratings. What the perspective is this: Monday Night Football is the biggest thing on Monday nights. And Monday night was their ratings were going so low because you had Raw getting an astronomical ratings. You had Nitro doing the same thing. That didn't leave much for Monday Night Football. So they brought in Dennis Miller, a comedian, to be an announcer for Monday Night Football to try to boost their ratings because they're that worried that they were going to lose, that they were losing that bad that they were going to lose their viewership and lose their time slot on Monday night for Monday Night Football. That tells you the impact that the Monday Night Wars had.
And again, I think that at the time, being in WWF and having a lot of time on my side, especially the first 3 months, because my family wasn't even up in Connecticut with me. So I was there in the little corporate apartment that they had put me up in until I found my own place, yet. And I was like, well, I got nothing to do. I'll just go hang out at the studio and I'll watch the WCW pay-per-view and we'll see what happens. Wasn't expecting anything great or anything earth-shattering. Found out that they had somebody from the TV studio monitoring all the WCW pay-per-views. I did not know they did that. So a young production assistant would take notes on what happened and submit them to, probably Vince and Kevin Dunn the next day. Little did we know that on this night, Casey Thompson, that the earth would shatter and everything would change. Now, were you at Bash at the Beach? I know you were very close with Kevin Sullivan. I know you were very close with people in the company. Were you there? Were you an eyewitness? Did you know what was going to happen?
No, no one knew what was going to happen. That was the biggest kayfabe thing, that there's very few people knew that Hogan was actually at Kevin's place that was right down the street.
So that's where they were stashing Hogan?
Yeah, at Kevin's house. Kevin had a condo on the beach right down the street from the Ocean Center. Yep.
Interesting.
He walked in, it was like, whoa. It was a game changer. Hulk Hogan's at WCW.
Yeah. Well, what happened then with so he drops the leg on Randy Savage and the garbage starts to fly. What was the next time you were there? What was kind of the attitude, the feeling of those within the WCW locker room? Did people think it was going to be good business? Did people think that WCW was in a position to maybe put the WWF out or down? What was going to happen?
Emotions were definitely high because, it just came off of a huge, momentous thing. And yeah, I mean, everyone knew that the tide has shifted and it's going to go towards WCW. WCW is going to be the leader and WWF is going to be the chase, and they're going to be behind, and I think the big factor that helped a lot is that Raw was taped then. Were they taped then?
Yeah, it was 1 week.
Nitro.
Yeah, 1 week was live, and the next 3 weeks were taped.
Right. So, and Raw was live. So, of course, you have Eric Bischoff giving away all the finishes, which kind of backfired some, but also it brought a whole new allure to WCW. You never knew what's going to happen, because they're going to tell you, don't switch that. Mick Foley's going to win the championship.
Yeah. And obviously, yeah, WCW had the advantage of being live, and there were always a lot of things, especially with people jumping ship. But let's stay in 1996, and let's stay with the idea now that Hulk Hogan has turned. It's the birth of Hollywood Hogan. It's a new era in his career and a new chapter. The NWO was becoming the biggest thing in wrestling by far. It was the only thing in wrestling that had any buzz at all. And I can tell you, when I'm sitting there in Stamford, and I was sitting on a high chair, a stool that they had in, the tape operators would sit there. And I'm watching the monitor, and I see him come down, and immediately I think something's up, and Hogan drops the leg, and I'm like, this is going to be bad for WWF, because this is exactly what Hulk Hogan needed. This is exactly the boost that the company would need. A fresh coat of paint, a heel Hulk Hogan. My God, we've never seen this before. What's going to happen now? And I just remember having like a kind kind of a down feeling in my stomach, like this isn't going to be good. And it wasn't. For a long time, it wasn't good.
Did it get really bad then for a while? Didn't they take the water coolers out of the offices, and
Well, there
people
was,
were taking pay cuts, and
there were pay cuts. That was all before that. Pay cuts had happened in like 94, 95. JJ left.
Okay.
And there were, a lot of bitter feelings. That was pay cuts within talent relations. Obviously starting to lose talent, not able to re-sign Hall and Nash. And there were other changes that were going on. We had, there were a lot of changes. There were a lot of switches. Heenan left. Okerlund left. There was a lot of the old guard that was moving on. And obviously, what now?
Hogan brought all of his guys in.
Yeah, he kind of did. Sure.
He brings his inner circle wherever he goes.
Right. Why wouldn't you?
They also, that was kind of the senses in the locker room is like, oh, I'm going to lose my spot because Hogan's going to bring in one of his friends. So, I mean, you had one hand, people were happy because business was good. The other hand, they're like worried about losing their spot because Hogan's going to bring in,
his guys.
Typhoon, going to bring, guys like that that are in his clique.
The Nasty Boys were going to be
kind of thing. Nasty Boys, yeah.
We were going to see Beefcake, no doubt. But I can tell you, so during this time, WWF was losing money, and this was not the publicly traded, financial juggernaut that we know today. This was still the company that was owned by Vince and Linda. And they lost in 1996, they lost $6 million. That was what they told us. That's how much they lost. And it was the first time in a long time that the company and the employees of the company were not going to be able to provide any profit sharing, which had become like a big part of I'll stay here as an employee. I might, the hours are such or whatever, but I know that I get a nice check every year with profit sharing. And Vince and Linda, they always said this. Vince and Linda are great bosses. They're very generous. They take care of us with profit sharing. And people had no complaints about that. They might not like their immediate supervisor or the hours that they work or whatever. But they always liked Vince and Linda because they were very generous with profit sharing. And the sense that I got from the people that I worked with at the TV studio who had been there a long time is that business must be really bad because Vince and Linda aren't providing any profit sharing at all this year. And in fact, nobody said, well, they say they've lost $6 million. That's a lie. They're making money hand over fist. No, everybody that was there, they didn't need to see financial reports. They didn't need to see, what the analysts say. They didn't need to have it in front of them in black and white. They took Vince and Linda's word for it. That if they said they were,
tell that business was down too. Tell business was down.
They're not stupid, but at the same time, people, sometimes people don't believe the boss, but they believed Vince and Linda. We had profit improvability meetings, Casey.
Oh, wow. I still find myself to this day, I'll go to a concert and I'm like looking at it and saying, all right, there's 10,000 people here. This is
count the house,
$700,000 house.
Yeah.
I went to a little concert the other day. It was a small venue. It might've been 1,000 people. I'm like, they made $41,000 off this house here. This place probably cost $10,000, this and that. And I'm like breaking it down how much they made. I find myself doing that all the time. I'm like, it's just crazy. I think it's just something left over from the wrestling business,
Of course. I do that all the time too. We'll talk more. And by the way, we are going to hear this week on the In-Ring Wrestling podcast. We're focusing on a time and our specific memories around a time. And Casey has a lot of personal memories that he's going to get into because he was there in some really interesting roles. He's going to get into and tell those stories about his viewpoint of what was going on during those Nitro tapings, those Nitro episodes that were live outside MGM Studios. And every week here on the In Ring Wrestling Podcast, we're going to kind of delve into a different era, a different topic, a different thing. Like maybe for next week, Casey might talk about some of the guys that he liked working with, some of the guys that he didn't like working with. Maybe we'll talk about our viewpoints on a specific wrestler or a specific match, a specific time. But a lot of this is going to be dictated by you. Share your comments. What's the kinds of things that you want to see? Put it in the Facebook, put it on our Facebook page. You could social media. You can also do chat here, which I don't know if we've seen any chat. But anyway, those are the types of things that you could be a part of each and every week here on the In Ring Wrestling Podcast. Okay, so WCW was up. WWF was down. Hogan turns. Live tapings outside. Everything is looking up for WCW. Casey Thompson, you were wrestling on Nitro. No, you weren't wrestling on Nitro, but you were on the show and you had a role on the show that I think probably most people would be surprised to hear about. Tell us that story.
So I think it was the first. It was the night that. You remember back when they did the outside arena at MGM?
Yes.
And you seen Hall and Nash sat on top of and lawn chairs on top of it. I was on a scaffolding across from 3 scaffolds high, and my job was to ring the bell. I'm like, hey, I don't care. I'm getting a payday, So I had the headset on. It was cool. I got the headset, so I'm hearing I get to hear everything. I'm hearing the producers produce the show. I mean, everything. So to me, I was like, yeah, this is cool. Well, all they told me is the start of the match, 2 dings, to end the match, 3 dings. And if they say ring the bell, just keep ringing the bell. If they say ring the bell, keep ringing the bell. They had some big smudge where all I'm hearing on the headset is ring the bell, ring the bell, ring the bell. So I'm ding, ding, ding. Meanwhile, the bell is hardwired into the sound going live on TV. So I was ringing the bell so many times that they could not hear the broadcast because I keep on I'm hearing Jody Hamilton yell ring the bell. I'm hearing Terry Taylor ring the bell. I'm hearing whoever was on the headset, Arn Anderson, whoever was on the headset, ring the bell, ring the bell. So I just kept on continuously just ringing the bell. And pretty much that part of that segment, the announcers weren't even able to be heard and this is all live, so there's nothing they can do about it. They can't go back and post and fix it. So they're like, you know what? You're never ringing the bell again. The only time they let me. I got fired for ringing the bell at WCW.
Damn it. Well, that daggone Pee Wee Anderson was probably there like this too, right? Like he's pointing and gesturing. You're just following orders.
I did what I was. Well, that you could do what you're told, but you have 10 Indians and one chief and 100 little Indians. 100 chiefs and a bunch of little Indians. There had too many bosses there.
Right.
One person would say something, and then Hogan would come in, and I actually seen Kevin Sullivan as the pyro was going off, rewriting the show, giving it to Janie Angle to type up as the pyro was going off, rewriting the shows.
Yeah,
because Hogan didn't like what it was.
And again,
creative control.
It's one thing to make those changes early in the day. It's one thing to make those changes ahead of time. But when you're making those changes as the show is going on the air live, you wonder why. If you wondered why, how come some things in WCW were so good and some things in WCW were not so good? That's a pretty good reason why. Was that your only time on headset in WCW? Did you have a chance to listen? Because I could tell you who was on headset in WWF and the people that I would hear. But was that always common for?
Once in a while, there would be a headset in the back. I'll throw it on, like in the grill. I would sit in the gorilla position,
right?
Because they let different people do gorilla and sit there, and you hear Jody. You have a take it home. He's get an IVF to the ring announcer and through the IVF to the ring announcer and to the referee and stuff like that. So I mean, if there's a headset laying there, I'll grab it and just put it on, just hear what people, or I'll try to grab one of the production ones and hear what the cam. I was just in the game. I wanted to learn about everything. So if I had an opportunity to, take advantage of something that other people do, why do you want to do that? I'm like, I want to learn.
I want to know everything.
Which you fast forward 10 years, I produced my own wrestling television show, and a lot what I learned from there, I implemented into when I ran MXPW.
Right. And yeah, those were the things that obviously Casey Thompson did not, have he hadn't produced his other shows and he hadn't been on television or whatever people were saying, but he knew television. He still knows television. And because he worked for, at the time, the biggest wrestling company in the world, even if it was as, and again, you could have just said, well, I'm just a day paid extra. I'm not really part of anything. I don't need to do anything else other than do my matches. But no, you wanted to learn. And that was the thing with me.
Television company.
Yeah. I wanted to learn too.
Yeah, because I wanted longevity in the business. So what can I learn that might be able to help me later down the road? Is the perspective how I always looked at things.
Right. And
it worked out.
So then the next day, so the pay-per-view was over the weekend and Raw was taped. It was a taped week. There was nothing going on. There was no, I mean, they had the commentary done live. So they could have mentioned it. They could have talked about it. They didn't talk about it. What did you guys do the next day after the pay-per-view? Did you go to MGM and tape? Was there tapings at MGM or did it take a day off and start again on Tuesday?
No, we had the day off because, the pay-per-view was Sunday night. And so we would have had Nitro Monday Night Live at MGM in the studio.
So they just did Nitro that night. Then Tuesday start again with taping for the syndicated programs.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Taping 3 to 4 tapings a day. It's like back in the day, you go to TV and they would have 50, 60 matches on the board. They would tape like 4 weeks in one day or whatnot. They changed it up and they started doing that, but they had so many syndicated programs that,
right.
They had Worldwide, they had Pro, they had Saturday Night, they had, I don't even know all the names of the shows they had. There's so many of them. Then there are syndicated ones all across the country that were just in Spanish or French or Indian, so they're all over the place.
Right.
So I got people across the country, different across the world that's watched me wrestle. And I'm like, okay, I never knew I was wrestling over there, but I guess that's how strong the outlet went. They were literally everywhere.
And I know that, again, a lot of the stuff that I did in WWF, especially early on, was the international versions of, the different syndicated shows. They would build their own packages for international because, again, there's different rules about violence on television in America and various foreign countries. So depending on what those rules might be, there were things that they couldn't show. So they would re-edit packages. They would re-edit elements that had aired on Raw, and they would sanitize them, if you will, for that country's standards. They would put in some matches. There were a couple matches that were exclusives because they didn't air anywhere else. And they would make the international versions of those shows. That was a lot of what I did. That was what Jim Ross was doing. That was what Gorilla Monsoon was doing. Jim Ross gets promoted once Vince stops doing his announce work on Raw, and plus he had all the duties with talent relations. I slid into JR's spot, and that was how everything kind of got started. So now talk to me about where you guys stayed, because you lived in Orlando. So would you go home each day?
No, of course not.
No, where did you stay? Did you guys stay at the Residence Inn?
Yeah, we did for a while. We stayed at the Residence Inn with Herb, and
Old Herb Hennessy.
Jimmy. Yep, and then Jimmy had a. We were there for a while, where they had a big party like near the end of the tapings. They had a big tent with like a pig roast and all that. Of course, Flair would be there and you'd be, get drunk and get half naked, and you'd find his Rolex laying there. Typical story that's happened a million times with him. I spent a lot of times up in the I don't know, above the office in the clubhouse, playing cards with like Boss Man, Paul Roma, different guys like that. We'd sit up there and play cards and get our food and hang out and everything. Yeah, it was like we took over the whole and it wasn't just a hotel, it was like apartment complexes in there. So we took over the whole community.
Right.
I had a room there, and then for whatever reason they switched it, and then we ended up staying at some someplace out in Kissimmee called maybe it's when we switched over to Universal or something called it was further away. The top guys didn't stay there, but all the boys stayed there, shall we say. It was a place called Pineapple Pizza. They had a bar there at the hotel, and I would say it was a motel, well, maybe a little bit nicer. It wasn't the itchy scratchy. It was a little above itchy scratchy.
Gotcha.
It was cheap. It was close to the 20 minutes from the studio, and we had a bar right there that everyone came to, all the Rizats and all that. So it was everyone knew where to go. So all the boys used to stay there. And,
was that so? Wait, that hotel was called that place was called Pineapple Pete's. That bar.
Yeah, the bar was called Pineapple Pete's.
Isn't that what Jericho called Sugar Dunkerton a couple of years ago on AEW? Like he couldn't remember his name, and so he called him Pineapple Pete. I think that was his name. That's funny. Now we know the origin of that name. Okay, very good. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. Pineapple Pete's is where we stayed at. And back going to the whole story we're going to get into about breaking some stuff. Well, one of the guys that was involved in the match, he's like, the drinks are on me, and I'm not a drinker. I never drink in my life. He's like, I'll see you at the bar. And I'm like, I don't drink. From that point on, I never paid for a hotel room with WCW. I always
tremendous. Yeah, we will talk about that. We will talk about that story about how Casey Thompson caused almost $200,000 worth of damage. Was it with your feet? Was it with was it your martial arts style? Were you Ninja Man out there?
I think I had nothing to do with it. I think we're going to blame it all on everybody else.
It's that guy over there.
If you go by what Paul Orndorff said, he says, I don't give a fuck. I hate cameramen. If they're in the way, kick them again.
One of the cameramen, of course, just passed away not too long ago, Jackie Crockett, of course, member of the Crockett family. And a legend. When I was with AEW, there were still some people who had worked with WCW and had been with the crew. A lot of the crew went from WCW when that went out of business, and then they had started working for Jarrett and TNA, and then some of that crew stayed together and started working for AEW. They were able to put the team back together. All right, so next week, Casey, we'll focus on you destroying equipment, and we're going to talk about some of your favorite guys to wrestle. In the coming weeks, we're going to talk about some of the people that Casey hated to wrestle and why. And we'll start to rank some of the old timers in terms of how they were with extras, how they were with, how they dealt with different people, whether they were good to you guys or whether they were bad to you guys. And we're not going to worry about anything. We're going to talk about Chris Benoit. We're going to talk about controversial names in the industry whose who've been stricken. We'll talk about Disco Inferno because I have my own personal recollection of Disco Inferno because I too did work for WCW, and I will tell you that story right here by cracky. So Casey, let's wrap it up here with some kind thoughts because I know you have done a lot of outreach this week with this podcast, talking to a lot of fans, getting set up all across social media.
Yeah, we're just we're growing. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. We realize it's going to take a lot, but it's going to take just more than us to make this thing grow. We need you guys to go onto our YouTube. It's at In Ring Wrestling Podcast. Just go there on YouTube, just subscribe and like, you'll get all the notifications. Facebook, you can go to the Facebook group, same thing. Everything's the same name. Instagram. And I followed a lot of wrestling groups across the country just to advertise that we're having a show going on. So I'm up to date on all the Alabama wrestling, Mississippi wrestling, wrestling from everywhere. Gracious enough to let me go ahead and join the group to promote our show.
I want to thank
all of them for that.
I want to thank my great friends at Wrestling X Coffee, Wrestling Types Coffee, Wrestling, however you say it, Wrestling X Coffee is the place for you to be. I want to thank our friends with AXW, American Excellence Wrestling. Big show coming up there on December the 7th. And there are a lot of opportunities for you, for your company, for your promotion to be sponsors here within us. We'll give you full access to our audience. And again, this audience is going to grow week by week. People were excited because they're like, you and Casey, it's like you've known each other for years. Well, yeah, we've known each other for 30 years plus. So,
it was a great response for the first week.
Right. Exactly. And it's only going to get better as, listen, this whole deal is going to be all tricked out. Casey figured out how to get rid of all the StreamYard stuff and put our own stuff up on there. And before too long, we're going to have this thing singing literally songs when we go live here each and every week. And of course, if there are any updates, if there's any late breaking news, if Casey and I feel the need, we've got to jump on live. Who knows? We might do a spot live here and there. But we want to thank you very much for joining us. Casey, any final words? Any last words today? My God, Casey's frozen.
Next week at 2:00.
There he is. All right. For Casey Thompson, I'm Kevin Kelly, and we'll see you next week right here on the In Ring Wrestling Podcast.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.